Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome. I am Erin Martin, the VP of Marketing here at NetSertive, and I am joined today with Tim Tyndall, one of our product managers, and Eric Anders, one of our campaign performance managers. I know that between the two of them, they have years of experience putting together media plans and doing data analysis on high consideration products and services. And so I'm really excited about the content that we have for you guys today. Before jumping in, there are a few housekeeping items I wanted to cover. We will be sending out the deck and recording for you all to have. And just a reminder that this is a live webinar, and so your questions are encouraged. You can pop those into the Q&A window, and we'll get to them throughout the content as we can. And then we also have a section at the end for some questions and answers as well. So with that, let's kick it off. Today we are here to talk about the best practices around digital advertising for high ticket products and services. And I know as marketers, every day we wake up and we have a ton of information to digest, a ton of decisions to be made. And when you layer on trying to market for something with a longer sales cycle or longer path to purchase, then that becomes even harder. And so our goal today is really to have you walk away with some inspiration and ideas around how to capture more online leads in your local markets, and then also understand how to best analyze all of that activity and performance data. And a quick note about NetSertive, that is what we are all about. We're here to help you drive and measure the return on your local marketing investment. We want to help you capture more leads in your local market and then provide you with the right information at your fingertips to be able to make better business decisions and ultimately improve your bottom line. So to kick it off, I first off want to dig in with Eric, who, like I said, has years of experience doing media plans for a lot of high ticket products and services. And Eric, I forget, how many years have you been with NetSertive again?
Hey, yeah, Aaron. So I have been with NetSertive now for 3.5 years this month.
Awesome. So 3.5 years, you have put together a lot of media plans and seen a lot of things. And I think in the next few slides, you're going to walk us through some of those top tactics that are mission critical for anyone who's selling a high ticket item to have in their arsenal.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Aaron. So I've worked on thousands of campaigns aimed at trying to sell more boats, furniture, home remodeling, cars, home AV systems, you name it. And you're right, the buying cycle and the research process for those items, because of how different they are, requires a very nuanced approach to your digital advertising tactics. So knowing that, I'm going to jump right in and get us started on what things we need and should be taking advantage of when capturing demand as effectively as possible. So let's jump right in. Perfect. So this may be obvious, but where you want to start is your audience. So your audience is one of the most, if not the most important part of capturing demand. I'll get into some great places to find audiences and trends in new slides, but wanted to dive into some of the most common and important audience types and how you can use these to advantage when trying to really solidify your audience. So knowing the different ways to segment your audience, as well as what audience types fall on the marketing funnel, is crucial when you're doing market research on what audiences are performing well. So to jump right in, the first audience segment that I want to talk about are custom audiences. So custom audiences, when you're looking at this kind of represents the marketing funnel here. We're going to be awareness, consideration, decision. Custom audiences here are really interesting because they can be at the top of the funnel or at the bottom of the funnel. They can be as granular as you would like. So they could be the coldest traffic, maybe people who have never heard of your brand or product, or really low funnel traffic that someone is really ready to buy in that moment right then and are familiar with your product, as well as competitors. Custom audiences, they're a great tool in making sure you're targeting very specific audiences tailored to your goals. So that's one thing I think we should definitely be taking advantage of when you're really trying to capture demand. Affinity audiences, working our way down in that awareness consideration portion of the funnel. An affiliate audience is going to be your cold to warm traffic. So they may be familiar with your brand and or may be familiar with your product, but essentially what an affiliate audience is doing is it's people who are similar in a certain way. So one example is in the automotive industry for us, we've noticed is that there's an affinity audience for do-it-yourselfers. These DIYers perform unbelievably well in automotive campaigns, but that doesn't necessarily mean Google has deemed them or Facebook or whoever is breaking up these audiences as in market, but they are still performing really well. So just insights like that, and I'll get into some more details onto how to find these audiences later, but working that in, the next audience down is going to be our in-market audiences. So this is where you're starting to get into that warm to hot traffic where they're very familiar with similar products. They're in the market to buy the product that you are selling at that moment. And the in-market audience is a great opportunity to really point your audience in the direction of why your product is better than others. The upper funnel is going to be a big education piece in explaining what your product is, what your brand is, and what you do. The in-market portion is saying why you're better than everybody else and why they should buy your product over theirs. And then we're going to go into the golden child of audiences. I'm sure you all know this, and this is going to be your remarketing audiences. This can be page retargeting, event retargeting. There's lots of different kinds, but this is the hottest traffic that you have. They've been to your website before. They're very familiar with your products. They're familiar likely with your competitors' products as well. So this is one of the most effective ways of making sure you're hitting those low funnel, ready to shop buyers. And remarketing is really important. And I guarantee I'll say that probably 5 more times in the next couple of slides, but it needs to be used effectively and it needs to be in line with the product you're selling in terms of buying cycle, which I'll get into a little bit more in a few minutes.
Yeah, and Eric, one question we received was how to advertise for luxury intenders. And I think this came from a dual dealership who was wishing to differentiate between their mass brand and their niche luxury brand. And I think this could be applicable to more people on the call than, someone who's just at a dealership. So, how should someone think about reaching that type of luxury audience?
Yeah, absolutely. So no matter what, and if this came from a dealership, this could happen for anyone that's selling lower ticket or high ticket items. The main thing you really want to make note of is that you need to be using different campaigns. You don't want these things to be in the same campaign together because they're going to have different keyword strategies, different bidding strategies, different audience strategies. There's all different things related to that brand. You need to make sure that the audiences are relevant to your brand. And that's just, one example would be you can filter down, say, these audiences. Let's say you're running a display campaign and you want to run an in-market luxury campaign, someone who's in the market for a luxury vehicle at that time. That's great, but the thing is that you may need to filter that down a little bit more too. So one way to do that is, let's say, for luxury vehicles, typically this is going to be people who are in the higher income bracket or be the higher income demographic. This is more detailed demographic targeting, but making use of all of these targeting options inside of these platforms will help you to kind of cut the fat on those, say, people who may not necessarily be in the market, but are considered in market for luxury. And one example of that is, it's pretty funny. When I was a kid, I used to look up, say, Lamborghinis all the time when I was like 8 years old on the internet. And
Cool.
the thing is, I'm not in the market for a Lamborghini, and I wasn't then either. But the thing is that people are still searching for that. So being able to have this detailed demographic targeting and being unbelievably specific with your audience is going to help you. At the end of the day, know your audience, know how to filter down that audience if necessary, and be as specific with your advertising and your landing pages as possible. And that's the best way to differentiate between the two.
Yeah, and that's great because a few questions that we also received was how to bring in just more qualified customers. I think one person even called out, how do I find real customers, not deadbeats? And this is where audiences, I think, can really help. And not just looking at this list and choosing one audience, but maybe layering them together to hone in on that highest quality prospect. So how should someone think about using the different audiences together?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. So I'll get into some details on this in a few of the future slides, but layering audiences is a great idea, and making sure you're hitting all parts of the funnel is crucial in an effective digital marketing campaign. You can only get to the remarketing phase if they've already been to your website and you successfully brought them through that buyer journey to bring them to your website. They have to be aware, they have to be considering you to make it to your website in the first place. And again, I'll talk about overall brand awareness in the coming slides, which will probably shed more light on this. But at the end of the day, if you're hitting all parts of the funnel to learn about what audiences are the best performing for you and your product and your brand, and then reassessing, let's say, how those are performing constantly, see which parts of the funnel may require more or less advertising, you're gonna have a significantly more effective digital marketing campaign. A lot of the testing and constantly learning from the test to find more qualified online shoppers is unbelievably important and something that everyone should be doing with digital marketing campaigns. So at the end of the day, layering audiences, it's going to help you. Again, as I said, it's going to cut the fat off of those audiences where there may only be a few people in that audience that are true qualified shoppers. And this will help you, in the end of the day, increase your qualified leads.
Yeah, makes sense. Thanks.
Absolutely. So let's jump into this. So as we all know, and I mentioned before, every single product is going to have a very different buying cycle. For example, if you're buying a car, this could take many months to a year to make a decision on these things. So for that reason, your remarketing window is going to be a lot longer. So let's say 60 to 90 days. It could be even longer than that, of how long you're willing to retarget somebody to come back to your site. Whereas if you're selling a sofa or a mattress, this may only be for a few weeks to a month that somebody's really making a decision on wanting to get a new sofa or mattress. So shorter buying cycles like sofas and mattresses and things like that with longer remarketing windows can lead to a lot of wasted ad spend on shoppers who may have already made a decision, and you could just be showing them ads while they're sitting on the couch of your competitor that they bought it from. So you want to make sure you're hitting them as often as possible and as early as possible. This is a great visual representation that Google has put together an idea of what they call, as a point of view for the customer journey, the messy middle. So this is kind of that awareness consideration middle where people are deciding between what products they want. The messy middle is basically, like I said, it's a loop of exploration and evaluation until they are making a decision on the product they want to buy. How long they're in this messy middle is largely dependent on the product and also available options for that consumer, because there may be more options, so they have to stay there more and do more research. So once a client's been to your site, they'll likely be looking or browsing in other places as well. Some examples would be competitor sites, but also review sites, search engines, comparison sites, and many more. Also, they may just be on YouTube or Facebook and may not have any active search intent in that moment. But that is why it's so important to be making sure that you're hitting customers who've already been to your site all over the internet. You don't want to be just on one platform and putting yourself in a silo, because there's a lot of people outside of that platform that have been to your website. And by showing up on different sites and platforms, customers may only need then to search for something one time. And that's the ideal thing from a digital marketing campaign perspective, because it would avoid a double search. And a double search is not necessarily the best thing you want, because the costs associated with clicking a search ad are much higher than clicking, say, a display ad, a Facebook ad, or something like that, where it's a lower intent advertisement. So all in all, if you can stay top of mind for the duration of the consumer's buying cycle, they're going to be much more likely to end up with your product over a competitor's in the end.
Yeah, and that's a great point about staying top of mind, which actually reminded me of a conversation that I had the other day with a marketer of custom closets. And we were talking about the importance of quality content. And so not only to use these touch points to be able to stop of mind or stay top of mind, but to continually add value throughout that purchase cycle. So, you know, if you know that they're interested, they visited your site, help them answer questions that you know someone in that stage might have, or provide those comparison shopping options or price comparison options, or highlight reviews. I think, content can be something that's really hard to do, and we put a lot of effort into it and it ends up on our website, but it's a good reminder to use it in our advertising. So we're not just throwing just our logo up there to try to stay top of mind that way, but actually deliver some value from it. So that just reminded me of that. I'll let you keep going. I know you got more stuff to get to.
Yeah, absolutely. Cool. So, and again, I told you I was going to say it a bunch, but remarketing is really important. But at the end of the day, you need your consumers to visit your site before you can retarget them. They have to come to your site. You can't add them to that retargeting list until they're there. Because of this, knowing where you fall on this brand awareness scale is equally as important as just implementing a remarketing campaign. Having this information is going to allow you to make way more informed decisions on where your ad dollars should be spent. It can also make targeting significantly more straightforward for customers in all portions of the marketing funnel that may not have been to your site yet, or maybe have never even heard of your brand or product. Your marketing approach needs to be focused on your overall brand awareness. And I'll get into kind of where budgets should be focused based on where you are on this scale in a few minutes. But some examples: newer products and brands, they need more awareness. That's a given. These should be focused in the custom audiences, affinity, and in-market. And as I said, custom audiences can be bottom or top funnel, but custom audiences, affinity, and some in-market. These are those higher awareness phases where you're educating your customers. If you found that your product is significantly more established, you probably want to be focusing them more on the in-market and retargeting audiences, because they are going to be the ones where you're focused more heavily on the bottom of that funnel, because you don't want to be wasting on the upper ads on the upper funnel, because there are more people in the bottom funnel that are ready to buy right in that moment. Knowing where your product falls in the scale, I mean, it's really important, and it relates directly to what audience you're using, but it also directly relates to how you're going to be conducting research that you need to find your audiences. So jumping into the next slide, when conducting consumer research to define your audience and better understand where your audience falls in the marketing funnel, there's a few key things that you need to know and be able to utilize to make sure you're getting the most accurate information as possible related to your audience. So I'll go through this in no particular order on what's more important. They're all important, but they're just things that you need to be taking advantage of to make sure that you are capturing demand and making sure you're targeting the most effective audience. So the first one here is going to be analytics. This can be Google Analytics, Adobe Analytics, some type of analytics software that's going to allow you to parse out data and see these audiences very easily. The next one is customer surveys. So customer surveys are great. These are current customers, so they will be easily able to tell you behaviors, interests, and essentially they're just telling you what affinity audiences they're in. So this is great. You can use that to your advantage when you're online for any of these platforms. Current campaign data. Current campaign data may be one of the most important things that you can use and try and find your audience. If you're currently running a campaign, utilizing what works really well in those campaigns and future campaigns is unbelievably important, as well as the learnings for what doesn't work well. You need to be able to use those things for your future campaigns. Current digital trends, this can be Google Trends, blog posts, things like that, where people are constantly keeping track of digital trends in the market for things that may be changing. And then also one other one is testing new things and seeing what works. The testing and reassessing process is one of the most important things when you're working a digital campaign. And I know Tim's going to go into more detail on this, so I won't jump into it too much, but testing is very important. And one thing that it's really important to mention is that this research process is not just a one-time thing, set it and forget it. That's not the way this works. The market is constantly changing. So you need to be assessing these changes and need to be doing this research all the time. And if you can keep up with this process and you're keeping up with trends, your marketing success online is exponentially more likely.
Yeah, staying on top of trends can feel like a Herculean effort sometimes. And so that was another big question that we got from a few people was, what are the biggest changes that we're going to see in 2021? And I know that there's a lot, especially about how we're, adapting during this new digital age. So are there a few top themes that are bubbling up that you can share with us?
Yeah, absolutely. So I have a few examples that I can give, and I won't dive into too much detail on them, but they are some of the biggest trends, I think, going into 2021 that anyone working in digital marketing is going to want to keep their eye on. So the first one, and anyone who is running a current Facebook campaign has probably received an email, a notification, something about this change, and that's iOS 14 updates and how it relates directly to Facebook. So this update, it's made tracking significantly more difficult on iOS devices, iPhones, within the Facebook app. Because of this, marketers need to be even more vigilant than they were before on keeping track of necessary requirements to keep your campaigns running, but also you need to be continuously measuring how your campaigns are doing now versus how they were doing in the past, because even Facebook is unaware of how this change will directly impact all their campaigns. The attribution windows are going to change. The actual attribution models they're using are going to change. They're going to a last click attribution model now. So lots of changes happening with that. There's not too much information on this in terms, again, about how the performance trends are going to be. So keeping track of this is really important.
And that one real quick, Eric, just to pause on it real quick. If I was going to share that in layman's terms, just in case someone hasn't heard of that iOS 14 update, and correct me if I'm wrong in my breakdown of this, but it's basically that now with this update, users are going to be getting a pop-up that has a opt-in option to being tracked, as opposed to currently how it works, where you have to go and find the opt-out, which basically means that more people are going to opt out up front because there's that pop-up. And so tracking, that's just going to be a different way of doing things moving forward. Did I recap that update correctly?
Yeah, that's spot on. Yeah, it's essentially just taking a lot of the data out of the audiences, so it's harder to track and create audiences with Facebook.
Yeah, gotcha. Cool.
Cool. So a few other ones. This will be no surprise to anybody, especially over the last year, but online shopping. So online shopping has continued to increase, specifically on mobile devices. As you can see on this slide, mobile purchases have increased 25% year over year. This isn't a shock probably to anybody, but it's something that you need to be making sure that your mobile websites are optimized for mobile searches. They need to be optimized. If you have an e-commerce service that's going through your website, you need to make sure that this is mobile friendly, and also just in general online friendly. Make sure that it's all working correctly. But yeah, so mobile purchases, online purchases. The next one, and it relates directly to kind of the digital trends we were talking about before, is that people now, and they may not be necessarily financially insecure, but people, because of with coronavirus and everything happening over the last year, are significantly more conscious of where they're spending their money. So deals purchases and incentives purchases have gone up exponentially. As you can see here, the best affordable, and that could be for any product, people are looking for the inexpensive best version of things, has increased 60% year over year. So making sure that in your digital marketing campaigns that you are honing in on sales, incentives, promotions, anything that will differentiate you from somebody else who may be really similar in terms of reviews and overall product quality, is something that you need to be doing. And lastly, this is one thing that I've noticed a lot in the automotive industry, but it can be for anyone, is that delivery is really important right now. By delivery, I mean being able to bring your products or ship your products directly to your consumer, wherever they may be. So one example of this, one really good example, is car dealerships at the moment. A lot of them are bringing test drives directly to consumers because those consumers don't want to go to the dealership. They've adapted to this because they really need people to be test driving these cars. And one other thing that, I mean, this was happening prior to coronavirus or COVID or any of that. They're actually shipping cars across the country. I know of a few dealerships I've worked with that have shipped from Arizona all the way to Michigan because those people found a better deal there. And even with the shipping across the wire, they still got a better deal on it. So just making sure that no matter what your product is, that you can deliver it to somebody is huge right now, especially going in 2021. So all in all, put a bow on it. Staying on top of these trends is really, really important, but it's hard to do. But it's something that you need to be doing. For example, the iOS update, and that's for the sake of your Facebook campaigns. You need to be keeping up with all the current trends. Again, you want to be using Google Trends, campaign data, Google Analytics, everything I mentioned before. And if you can stay on top of those things, your overall market research process will be smoother and your overall marketing campaigns will likely perform much better.
Awesome. Thank you, Eric. Well, now I want to switch gears a little bit to talk with Tim, who is on our product team and has deep expertise in specifically data and analytics. So I'm really excited, Tim, for you to be able to talk to us about how to make sense of all this data. I think we have more data than ever at our fingertips, yet we're still struggling to figure out how to correctly measure and truly understand the impact of our marketing ROI. So how can we think about analyzing data? Where do we start?
Hey, thanks, Aaron. It's good to be here. Glad to talk to you. And you're absolutely right. Digital advertising is incredibly complex. And even the most basic campaigns, you're looking at potentially maybe over 30 different metrics that can all change by the minute as performance occurs. And all of these go into tuning, which, we've got for you, on the operational end here at NetSertive, but it can make focusing on the performance outcomes challenging. So the main thing to remember is that when you're measuring success, it's important to align the appropriate KPI with your business goal. Make sure you're looking at the right thing. And what we found is that most of our clients want to maximize their return on investment, right? So otherwise, you mentioned it, known as ROI. And so I figured today we could kind of start at the very beginning and talk about what is ROI and how do we measure it. So generally speaking, ROI is your return less your investment divided by that investment. That's it, right? And that results in a number that quantifies simply what you receive for what you spent. So for every dollar you spent, you received X number of dollars in benefit. There are three major things, key pieces of information that kind of go in to help determine your ROI independent of all of those 30 plus performance metrics that are out there. One is your close rate, right? So in other words, what percentage of your potential customers, either driven to you through leads like forms or calls or something like that, or in-person store visits, do you actually close the sale to, right? So for every 100 customers that we send to you, how many of it results in an actual sale, right? The second key metric is the average sale value. So how much does that customer spend on average? What does your product cost, right? Is it a car? Is it a bathroom remodel, right? The third thing that's really important to consider too when developing an ROI model is your gross margin. So what percentage of your gross sales do you realize as profit? So if you can know or even estimate these key values, it helps you drive ROI modeling. And there are a few different models that I kind of want to talk about here. And these are by no means comprehensive, but there are three of kind of the more common ones that we see. All of them kind of have the basic formula at the end, right? And that formula at the end is you take your unit sales, you multiply it times the sales value, and that gets you your gross revenue. And then you take that gross revenue and you factor in your gross margin, that gets you your profit. And then you take your profit and divide it by your ad spend, and that's your ROI. It really is that simple. But how you get to those unit sales can vary, right? So again, we've got a few examples of this. One of the more common ones we see here at NetSertive is the lead to customer model. So NetSertive will drive leads to your business in the form of calls or prospective form fills. You get PII, personal identifiable information on a customer, right? And our clients can close sales off of those leads. Once again, the sales lead in that formula all the way back to your ROI. Another model that you can consider with this is the service or store to customer model, where instead of driving leads, we're actually driving footprints into your store, actual people, right? So you get those visits, the client closes sales off of those visits, apply it to that model, and you get your ROI. The third one, and as Eric mentioned earlier, talked about how online more and more is important and making sure that you're hitting all aspects of the web, is the e-com model. And that's a much more straightforward model. NetSertive is driving sales directly to your storefront. You realize exactly what those sales are through your engine, and you apply that back to your ad spend, and you get your ROI.
And Tim, I want to pause there real quick before we continue, because I think, in general, as marketers, oftentimes we know our overall marketing ROI because we'll have, we know our spend, we know some of the metrics that you called out, and then the sales, and we can correlate those two things and the impacts that our advertising is having on the business. And then I think where this is going is that we really need to look at the model that we're using to also model this out at a more granular level. So, not just looking at click-through rates and, just ad level metrics, but being able to really look at revenue level metrics from all different angles at a granular level. And can you explain a little bit to us on why that's important?
Yeah, absolutely. Eric actually hinted at it a little bit earlier when he was talking about, testing things and learning from what you're seeing, in your individual campaigns. And so, while overall ROI is definitely a great way to measure success, we can actually dig even further down into ROI at network and channel levels to identify areas specifically that are working well, right? So getting past that overall ROI level so that we can figure out how to adjust things and use that attribution insight to make decisions to shift budgets to spend your dollars more wisely. You definitely don't want to waste money out there with your digital advertising campaigns. And from looking at this level, it can certainly help guide you in the right direction. I've got a couple of examples of some learnings that we have that I kind of want to run through with you real quick. One of them occurred with a home services client of us this year. In reviewing their ROI performance, we saw that display initiatives were performing at an elevated ROI level. So what we did was our operations team responded to this trend by investing more significantly into display advertising. They were seeing that it was performing really well. So they shifted some budgets around. And this resulted in month over month increases to the display ROI. And ultimately, it had such an impact that impacted the overall ROI, right? Which drove improved performance and ultimately more revenue for the client. If we had just been looking at the top level ROI and saying, that seems pretty good, right? We may have missed out on that opportunity to grow higher.
Yeah. And I mean, just even seeing this example is great to be able to break it down. And I would, this view is amazing. I think, in my career in marketing, I've seen everything when it comes to trying to pull a visual or a dashboard like this together can range from a homegrown Excel doc trying to pull in this information to having it automated where you have the dashboard and your CRM system or POS system working together to give you this intel. So, just to get at something like this, what are the best ways to set up reporting so you can see this level of information?
Yeah, that's a great question. You can make it as simple or as complex as you want. I mean, certainly you can pull information, especially if you have those three attributes handy, your gross margin, your average cart value, and your close rate. And you can pull in all of your lead metrics and everything. And you could put it in a Google Sheet. You could put it in Excel. You can put it in your own piece of software. You're teasing to a slide that's in a little bit in the future here, but we're working really hard to develop some new tools here at NetSertive that will make that much more simple for you. Not even just from our internal teams like what Eric would use, but for our clients who are listening today.
Awesome. Well, excited to see that slide. And then another question that we got in is not necessarily on an ROI level question, but it does relate to return, which I think is important. And that was, how do you track customer visits to the store from clicks? So basically, how do you bridge that connection of what your online advertising is doing and then, in-person home consultation or in-store purchase? What does that connection look like to be able to report accurately on ROI?
Sure, I can take that, Aaron.
Awesome.
So the way that works, how you can track customers directly from a click to a store visit is everyone online is going to have what's called a unique online advertising ID. It's no information directly related to you, your name, anything like that. It's just you have an ID online so they can directly target you. The way this works within any platform that can target store visits or at least have that attribution model is they can triangulate your location from the time that you've clicked on the actual ad and see if you've visited that store, dealership, what have you, and if you've walked in the door. And this provides the most accurate information based on a very widely accepted model across all of these platforms.
Yeah, and to add on to that, a lot of this is modeling, right? A lot of it is estimation and projection. Perfect models for store visitation are very challenging, right? But big companies like Google have invested a lot of money into this, and they feel really good about the numbers. And they're fairly accepted across the industry as standard, and we believe in it too. So I got another example to talk about here about how you can use, ROI and ad spend to better adjust your campaigns. You want to use lessons and make changes based upon data. And another one of the ways to evaluate and adjust is to do a comparative analysis, right? So by comparing individual locations or clients in a kind of a quadrant style, you see 4 boxes up here, you can quickly identify high and low performers. So if you plot individual client locations from a larger group onto this, you'll see if they fall into an area that has a higher ROI and a higher ad spend versus a lower ROI for the same ad spend. And what you can start to do is you can dig into the qualifications of each of them and glean what they were doing right and maybe what they weren't doing so right. And armed with that knowledge, you can review winning characteristics, learn from them, and then apply changes to those lower performance based upon data. Right. So a real world example that we have here, we had a group of clients who you see, we picked 3 of them that were in a high ROI, high ad spend quadrant and said, what are they doing right? And we saw that their overall ad spend was allocated to around 44% and 46% display and search respectively, right? So then when you shift gears and you take a look in that lower quadrant where they weren't necessarily getting as high of an ROI, we see that their display spend was a bit suppressed from what we saw in the more successful folks, and their search spend was a little high. And so what the information might tell us to do here is to shift some of that search spend over into display to see if we can rise those boats that are in that lower ROI up to a higher level based upon the things that we learned.
Awesome. And I think I was just reading one question that I had on this specifically and that also came in was this view, what we're looking at is ROI by location. So if you're a retail chain or a franchise network, then you can look at ROI by your different store locations. Mm-hmm. But I know there's a lot of individual stores that or dealerships that are on the call right now. And so how could they think about using this type of information?
That's a really good question. Any sort of segmentation can be applied to this model. You could do it by a vertical, you could do it by a geo, you could do it by time of year. As long as you felt like your individual data points were on a somewhat level playing field, it's all about learning. So certainly that is something that you can do on your own or something that we can do for you as well. So I hinted a little bit earlier about you asking, how do I get access to this data and what do I do with it? And we're real excited on this end on the product side about our new tools that are coming out for both our internal teams and our clients, with ROI as a focus and kind of distilling it down and making things simple for you to see how you've been doing, not just at a top level, but also getting down to that network and channel and even campaign level. These features are going to allow us internally to more quickly make tuning decisions to optimize for your goals. They will also in turn provide enhanced monitoring for you to see your ROI at granular levels. Our ultimate goal here is to have clear communication for you around exactly how your digital marketing investment is providing results for your business.
Awesome. Well, that is good stuff, Tim. And I know we had a few questions that come in that we can additionally get to. And the first one that we have is probably going to be for you, Tim, because it's about ROI, which is the ever popular, what can I expect from my ROI?
The $1 million question, right? Everybody wants to know what the expectation is. And, it's an incredibly challenging question to answer because there are so many variables, and they can change over time. Your gross margins may change. Your sales staff may improve and you may be able to have a higher close rate. There may be seasonality that goes in that impacts how expensive your impressions may be over time. Generally speaking, you likely want to achieve as high an ROI as possible, but you want to test that out and see how high you can get and see what that law of diminishing returns is. Generally speaking, though, with your digital marketing initiatives, if you are doing a greater than 1-to-1 ROI, it's paying off. And we should consider to push that and see how high we can go.
Yeah, and even that viewpoint of quickly being able to see ROI of less than 1 by, whatever cohort is huge, because that just automatically gives you an actionable playbook of what to do next.
Yeah.
Awesome. And the next question that came in is, how important is it to pay for boosts on social media, and do they reach the right audience? And I don't know, Eric, if you want to take that one.
Sure, yeah. So the question is, how important is it to pay for boosts on social media, right?
Yes.
Perfect. Okay. So yeah, so boosts on social media, they are important, and I'll go into some reasons as to why they are. So I guess I should add some context to that in the beginning. Is organic reach as of right now, it's in decline, and it has been for a while across a lot of platforms. I don't know if this is the exact number, but the last I checked, it was on Facebook. I think the average reach for an organic page post was right around 5%, something right around there. I don't know the exact number, but so boosting organic social posts, it's a great way to increase your reach and get in front of your audience because of this lack of organic reach that's been happening across platforms. You should still continue with a strong organic strategy, excuse me. And not all promotional posts also need to be paid, but you're going to be increasing your reach if you boost your best organic content or important campaigns, such as a new product or service. And to answer, I guess, the second part of the question is, do they reach the right audience? Is boost social posts definitely can reach the right audience. That's actually entirely contingent upon what audience you set up for them, because you can set the targeting for them directly in Facebook and in a lot of these social platforms. One example would be lookalike audiences. You can create a lookalike audience based on your current customers and directly target them. And that's going to be a great audience segment that you want to be going after. So they're a great way to increase your reach and target the right people. But don't get rid of just all of your organic in general, because organic is free. So any impression you get on there without needing to pay for it is a good thing.
Yeah, and that's exactly what we do. The NetSertive marketing team does. We oftentimes use boosting our social posts just if there's something that we want to lean into, and we get some good results from that. So definitely incorporate that into our own strategy. Awesome, thanks, Eric. And then the next one that I think is going to be for Tim that came in is how to ensure accurate measuring on data. And so I think this one is a little hard in that we know it needs to be accurate enough to obviously trust it and be correct, but it doesn't necessarily need to be absolute precision either, because we know, different platforms, whether it's Google or Facebook or Microsoft, have different algorithms. There's different timestamps on data, data being ingested in inconsistent ways. Can be hard. You're always trying to get to that apples to apples view. So Tim, what would your advice on that one be?
I mean, I think that there's some data that is absolute, right? You know how much you spent, you know how many clicks you got, that kind of thing, right? And then, as we talked about a little bit earlier when we were talking about the visitation model, some things are models, some things are estimations. You should always consider the things that you know and the things that you're estimating, but don't lose sight of the big picture, which is trends. Coming out to a nice ROI, if the difference between a 4 and a 4.2 ROI is just 0.2 points, but if it's a point higher than it was the month before, then you made some improvements to your campaign. So keep your eye on the big picture. Know that a lot of modeling is certainly based in a lot of research, and a lot of things have gone behind it, but watch out for trends more than individual data points.
Yeah, great points. And I know we had a few other individual questions, just a few come in that are personalized, so we'll answer those as a follow-up. So that is the end of the Q&A session. And we just wanted to thank everyone for their time today, and a huge thanks to Tim and Eric. You guys provided a ton of good content. After the webinar closes, there will be a short survey that we would love to hear your guys' feedback. And it's sort of, we know that trying to find your audience online and putting together an ROI analysis like this can be really hard. So after this, we're going to send out an ROI calculator in the follow-up if you'd like to play with some of those variables that can be tweaked to see how to improve the return on your marketing investment yourself. And then we're also offering a free ROI analysis for all of the attendees. So if you'd like some help getting there, then we've got your back as well. So thanks again, everyone, and we hope you guys have a great rest of the day.